Thank you so much for joining us today. We are proud to present Social Media Endorsements and Consumer Reviews, FTC Basics for Your Business. We have presenter Leslie Fair. She is a senior attorney for the Bureau of Consumer Protection from the FTC. We are very excited to have Leslie here today. I will go ahead and hand you over to her and she will take over and we can get this presentation started.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you, Brian. And thanks to everyone at the New Mexico BBB. I'm very delighted to talk about this very important topic today, especially to both member businesses as well as BBB affiliates across the country, because social media is what consumers are talking about, and it's what businesses are talking about too. And generally speaking, when done well and when done within the law, I think all of us can agree that social media can be a real benefit to businesses, especially small businesses, because unlike having to spend multi-millions of dollars for a 15 seconds of airtime on the Super Bowl or undertake other expensive ad campaigns, social media, when done truthfully, is a way to get the word out about your great goods and services, about the products you can offer to consumers in a cost-effective way. So we think social media is an important thing for businesses to know about to make sure they are honoring the law. I'm going to be talking about that topic and a few others today. Obviously, my comments are my own. I don't speak for the FTC, but I will do my best to both answer your questions as well as to give you the insights that I've gleaned from close to 35 years at the Federal Trade Commission. It's just a reminder, I'd like to think most of the folks on the webinar know who we are, but the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, when you look at that alphabet soup of federal agencies, we stand for two other important things, our missions as an agency. First, FTC stands for the consumer. We are the National Consumer Protection Agency. Of course, we work with other law enforcement agencies, for example, your state attorney general or city offices of consumer protection. We also work very closely for other entities that are striving for truth in the marketplace. That's why the Better Business Bureau has been such a good partner and friend for more than a century now with the Federal Trade Commission. We're also in favor of thriving competition. We believe that when competition is free and fair, when the level playing field is allowed to work, it can result in businesses striving and fighting for the best products, the lowest prices, the best research and development. We consider that a win-win-win for consumers. So that's why the FTC is also so committed to thriving competition. There are a number of different specific rules and guides that the FTC is responsible for enforcing. These won't be what I'm primarily talking about today, but I just want to make sure you're familiar with some of those. Certainly the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Anybody who's a parent of a kid under 13 should be familiar with the Children's Online Privacy Protection Rule, telemarketing sales rule, the FTC Green Guides. This offers guidance for when a company can call its product recyclable or biodegradable, can spam rule, and one of my favorites, the FTC textile rules. I have always enjoyed working on textile rule cases because it reminds me of what my late 97-year-old mother thought I did for a living. She was convinced that how I spend my day was wearing a navy blue windbreaker that said FTC across the back, and that I would bust into people's homes and offices to the tune of that Cops, bad boys, what you gonna do theme to make sure that people didn't rip out the tags in their mattresses and pillows. Obviously, that's not what the FTC does. Consumers are perfectly allowed to rip out the tags in mattresses and pillows. We want to make sure, though, that businesses include those very important tags so consumers know what's the content, what's the fabric make. So it's important information to give to consumers in that way. You'll have to take my word for it. I do not have a tattoo, and this is not my bicep. But were I to have a tattoo, here's the tattoo I would say. Unfair methods of competition or unfair deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce are hereby declared unlawful. Those are the primary words of the Federal Trade Commission Act, what we call Section 5 of the FTC Act. This is the statute to which I've devoted 35 years of my life enforcing. Now, the first few words, unfair methods of competition, that deals with the FTC's antitrust, that pro-competitive mission. I won't be talking about that today, but I will be talking about those other important words. Unfair acts or practices. That's what the Bureau of Consumer Protection at the FTC spends its time challenging. Now let's look at what those words mean. Under the FTC Act, an act or practice is deceptive if it's likely to mislead consumers who are acting reasonably under the circumstances, and if it would be material, important to their decision to buy or use the product. That makes up about 90% of what the FTC's caseload is like on the consumer protection side. The other key word is unfair. Under the FTC Act, an act or practice is unfair if it causes substantial consumer injury. Now, that could be physical injury, economic injury, or some other kind of injury, not reasonably avoidable by consumers themselves, and not outweighed by benefits to consumers or competition. That makes up a very important, about 10% of what the Federal Trade Commission does. However, of course, the first question on your mind that you may be asking right now, even before we get to social media, is what's the FTC been doing about the topic we're all talking about, questionable COVID claims? Here are kind of our stats of what's been reported to us by consumers. As of just a few days ago, as you can see, we have received 676,000 reports to from consumers about COVID-related deception or fraud. Total fraud losses, $675 million. Now, we have all of this information is public on our website. Wouldn't it be nice to see what's going on in New Mexico, for example? Well, gee whiz, we've got that too. So anyone from any state can find out what's going on in their locality. And you can see the statistics for New Mexico are pretty in line with what we're seeing from the rest of the United States. What we have done so far, first thing we have done is we have sent out 431 cease and desist demands, basically telling companies, most of which are advertising what we allege to be unsubstantiated and often just flat out false COVID cures and treatments, saying, we'll give you a day or two to take your claims down. We'll be back and we'd like to see deceptive representations gone. The good news is the vast, vast, vast majority of companies that have received those letters, received those demands, have honored that demand. We think that the result has been substantially fewer consumers being exposed to those, unsubstantiated COVID treatment or cure claims. Here's an example involving personal protective equipment. You all remember, I think even still now, it can be difficult to get some of the high-end equipment, but you can remember what it was like this time last year when we were basically making masks with bandanas and scrunchies. This company went online, supergooddeals.com, went online advertising incredibly low prices for those 3M a name brand products, the respirators that consumers and small businesses wanted. Think of the daycare centers, the nursing homes, the people who did in-home improvements and services who needed these respirators for their business. Our allegation in the case was that the company took the businesses and consumers' money and basically were gone with the wind. And they did not receive product, or that they received product much later than they were promised. As I say, it was called supergooddeals.com, I guess because superdececeptivepractices.com that URL was probably taken. This is not the end of the story, because in this particular case, the company and the individual that the FTC sued has also been charged and has now pleaded guilty criminally in the Eastern District of New York by the United States Attorney's Office there. So this is just, an interesting aspect that a lot of what the FTC does, of course, we are a civil law enforcement agency. We also work very closely with our criminal counterparts. And there are some forms of deceptive practices that cross that line, that jump over that line and are fraud. This is an example of someone who could face serious consequences when sentencing time comes around for failure to send consumers and businesses the promised products. Here's another one that I think, another case that the FTC brought. These were websites when companies, especially small businesses, were looking for those cleaning products and disinfecting products that when we were faced with empty shelves at the store due to supply chain issues. So what these folks did, businesses would pay hundreds of dollars to get the Clorox and Lysol products that they needed to keep their premises clean. Well, at least they thought that's what they were doing. These were not the websites of Clorox and Lysol. These were basically fake sites put up by people we allege to be scammers. One little tip off here: if you look at the one on the left, Corona, help prevent the spread of coronavirus, free shipping. My guess is Clorox is pretty good with having a spell check. They're a little more careful. But I think most consumers and most businesses are not going to pick up on something like that. But we went after the companies that are behind that in a continuing action. We also have been very concerned about the number of businesses that have attempted to prey on small businesses' interest in things like the Paycheck Protection Program administered through the SBA. Here was an example of a company claiming to be a direct lender for the SBA when in fact they were not. We think this is a particularly pernicious form of deception, since it impacts small business owners who are doing their best to keep their head above water at an unprecedented time in our national economy. So what have we done about dealing with COVID? We're still very involved. A number of the companies that refused to honor the FTC's cease and desist demands we're now in litigation with. So that's kind of the secondary effect of not paying attention. So let me move after that to the main topic for today, which is, of course, social media marketing. The primary concern is that established FTC truth in advertising standards apply to all forms of marketing, including your use of social media or businesses' use of social media. A lot of businesses think of advertising is when you buy a radio spot or you buy TV time, or maybe you buy something, buy a media package for local newspapers. They forget that social media is advertising too. And that's why that for legitimate businesses that want to stay on the right side of the law, they make sure that they are being careful to honor those same principles in social media. Very often what we will find is small businesses that have very good marketing compliance programs for their TV ads or their radio ads, but often put perhaps an inexperienced member of their marketing team or advertising staff on the social media account without giving them clear direction about what the rules for the road are. So that's just the first thing to say, that generally speaking, what you say on your social media, how you respond to consumer questions, how you describe your products and services is advertising that's subject to the FTC's truth in advertising standards. Now, what are those standards? This is going to be one of the few slides I'm going to offer with a lot of bullet point text, but I think these are important. That companies are responsible for all claims, express and implied, that consumers take from ads, and that we look at ads from the point of view of the target audience. Now, you notice I did not say whether an ad was literally true or false. Now, that may be relevant, but that's not the final decision-making factor. I often use the example of Angel soft toilet paper. Hate to break the news to you, not manufactured by Angels, but even so, not the kind of deception or untruthful statement that we would ever deal with, because that's not going to be deceptive to consumers. So we look at consumer perception. Fine print will not cure an otherwise deceptive ad. Are companies allowed to put their trademark information in small text? That's up to them. But we're talking about a print that's necessary to cure deception. Companies must have competent and reliable evidence to support all of their claims, but if they're health, safety, and efficacy claims, that bumps it up to competent and reliable scientific evidence. And finally, that these same standards that have been around for decades apply in new marketing media, for example, social media, new technologies, when consumers are looking at ads on their smartphones, and new kinds of claims. Here's just an example. This was these were health claims dealing with heart attacks, the treatment of Parkinson's disease, the treatment of autism in children. And how about this? The 101-year-old lady, once blind for 7 years, now sees again. Those were all on the medical practitioner's social media. And so the response is, are they ads? You bet they're ads. And the company needed to have substantiation to support those representations. So that's the important message, is just keep us in mind when you look at what you're putting on your social media. Here's an example of that. Here is an Instagram post by a company advertising the only American-made hockey puck. Well, that's great, except for the fact that they were made in China. The FTC enforces that all or virtually all standard for made in USA. That's not the topic today, so I won't go through a lot of detail about that. But we know for a lot of people, made in USA is a very powerful ad claim. Two products side by side, one says made in USA, one doesn't. That may make the decision for some consumers. That's why the FTC is absolutely insistent that made in USA claims honor truth in advertising standards. But again, this was on the company's Instagram. That is an ad and a claim that the FTC will challenge if false or unsubstantiated. So that sets the basic parameter that long-standing principles of truth in advertising apply in social media. Let's turn slightly to the overlapping area of the use of endorsements and influencers in advertising. The standard is the FTC's Endorsement and Testimonial Guide, the Endorsement Guides, where there exists a connection between the endorser and the seller of the advertised product that might materially affect the weight or credibility of the endorsement, i.e. the connection is not reasonably expected by the audience. Such connection must be fully disclosed. That's what the sort of legalese way of saying that those connections with endorsers and influencers do need to be clearly disclosed. But let's take a look at a few other important legal principles involving the use of endorsements. Certainly, they must reflect the endorser's bona fide experience. People can't talk about their marvelous experience with the product if they haven't used the product and if that wasn't the result. But here's an important thing. Do not say through an endorsement a statement about a product if you don't have solid proof independently to back it up. So if a company posts endorsements saying, from consumer after consumer saying, oh my gosh, the product, the arthritis in my hands, the pain has gone away. That company is making the implied claim, not just that that's the result that those consumers had, it's also making the implied representations, generally speaking, that they have scientific proof to back up those claims and that other consumers can expect the same result. The other important thing is not to cherry pick the best results. If the vast majority of consumers did not get that benefit, did not earn that amount of money, or did not lose that amount of weight, it is deceptive for companies, generally speaking, to tout simply their best case scenarios. Obviously, as I just said, clearly and conspicuously disclose material connections between the advertiser and any endorser, tweeter, blogger, influencer, Instagrammer, affiliate marketer, or whatever future form of media. We don't even have a name for it now. And the other thing is to remember that in the endorsement and influencer area, it's kind of a two-way street here, especially with influencers. Companies have an obligation to educate and monitor what their influencers are doing. Influencers have an obligation to honor truth in advertising standards. So it's a two-way street, but the FTC has some ways to help you keep that street free and clear. Here's one of the FTC's first cases dealing, these were tweets. The allegation in this case was that a major national advertising agency had its employees tweet from their personal accounts favorable information about one of their clients' products. In this case, it was a new video game kind of product, saying glowing things without revealing, and by the way, I work for the company's advertising agency. We think that is really seriously material information. If you saw a website that's best Washington lawyers website, and it listed Leslie Fair as the best lawyer in Washington, wouldn't it be important to you to know that it was a website put up by my sister, who I'm pretty sure even my sister wouldn't say that, but the important thing is that material connection is really important to evaluate how much weight any of us are going to give that endorsement. So that's why a familial relationship, kind of a family relationship, a personal relationship, a business relationship, those are the kinds of material connections that need to be disclosed. Here's one of my favorite cases. This dealt with tweets put out by, I guess they would be called professional gamers. These are some of the guys that go on YouTube and tape themselves playing games and other people watch. I am so not the target market, but I get that. I made $13,000 in about 5 minutes on Counter-Strike Global Offensive, betting absolutely insane. Here's another one of my favorites, bruh. I've won like $8,000 worth of CSGO skins today on CSGO Lotto. I cannot even believe it. Well, there was somebody else that could not even believe it, and that was the Federal Trade Commission, because T. Martin and Thomas were the owners of CSGO Lotto. So to claim that they made all of this money without saying, oh, we own the company, we believe was material information that needed to be clearly disclosed to consumers. More importantly, just not said, because it's not a truthful representation. Here's an example of what could have been, I think, a clever ad campaign that sort of went off the tracks. The Lord & Taylor department store hired a number of influencers to go on Instagram. These were mainly fashion influencers, and style their a new spring dress in different ways. And I look at this, and I would stop on Instagram and look to see, one has it dressy, one has it casual, kind of a clever ad campaign. But Lord & Taylor did not disclose the fact that they had paid a lot of the fashion influencers a substantial amount of money to do this. Now, let me make it clear, it doesn't have to be a fancy lawyerly disclosure. On the contrary, it shouldn't be. What it should be is something that conveys, just in a natural, organic way, what the nature of the relationship is. And when that disclosure is made, here is the FTC's general principle about disclosures. If the disclosure of information is necessary to prevent an act or practice from being deceptive, the disclosure must be clear and conspicuous. The FTC has got a decades-long history of working with the BBB to try to publicize and inform businesses about this standard. But I get the question all along. So how big is clear and conspicuous? Is it 4-point? Is it 10-point? Is it 24? Do you like the Times Roman? What about the Arial? What about the German? That's not how we look at it. We look at clear and conspicuous as a performance standard, not a font size. That applies in social media just like everywhere else. And that's why we look at what we call the 4 Ps. Prominence. Is the disclosure big enough for consumers to notice and read? Presentation. Is it worded in a way that's easy for consumers to understand? Proximity. Is it close to the claim it explains or modifies? And placement. Is it placed where consumers will have a meaningful choice? Let me give you an example of that last one. If the disclosure isn't made until after the consumer has already finished the transaction and bought the product, that's not much of a disclosure. That's an ineffective disclosure. So these are the things that the FTC will be likely to look at. Here's one of my favorite examples of this. This was a very popular video game that a company had hired some influencers to make YouTube videos about. And, I watch a lot of YouTube videos too. When I see this page, the likely thing for me to do is to press play. I'll be honest. How often do I go down to that more and open it up? I would suggest not a lot of consumers do that. But here's an interesting thing that would have happened had consumers done that. Down at the almost very bottom, they see this video is sponsored by Warner Brothers. Now, had that been in the beginning of the video or more clearly displayed, that would be that would probably be a sufficient kind of disclosure. Burying it in the bottom of a page that we know most consumers don't look at anyhow, the FTC alleged was not an effective disclosure. But wait, there's more, because the final line said this: no one reads this far into the description. What are you doing snooping around? That, my friend, is truth in advertising, because that's the problem, isn't it? That the person who did this, they understood that burying it in that place was not going to likely be found. So that's an example of an ineffective disclosure in a case like that. Here's how I've been wording it for a long time. What the headline giveth, the fine print cannot taketh away. And by fine print, I would also mean an unclear URL, a dense block of text, something buried in a privacy policy that would charitably be called sort of charcoal on slate font. We've all seen those. But that's the big picture point, that disclosing, saying one thing in the headline and then undoing it in the fine print will not be sufficient under FTC law. Now, I mentioned the FTC has issued some guidance both for influencers and the companies that use influencers. Disclosures 101 for social media influencers. It's available at business.ftc.gov. I would say very proudly, this is not a brochure, I hope, that looks like it's coming from a federal agency. No offense to federal agencies, but I think you can see we're trying our best to speak to businesses and influencers in language and an approach that speaks their language, if you will, because these are not standards we want them to think of as picky law stuff. We want them to think of them as disclosures to actually get the information across to consumers. I was asked many years ago, it was in a automotive context, that a company person said, I have no idea how to make anything clear and conspicuous. And my response was, listen, your industry invented the 60-foot inflatable Uncle Sam on your dealership car lot. You know how to make things clear and conspicuous when you want to. The question that's tougher is, How small can I make it and keep the FTC and the state attorneys general and the BBB off my back? Sorry, that's a tougher question and one I can't answer. But what I can say is that how do you make a clear disclosure? You think of what what regular customers, what your family members, what's going to be eye-catching and disclosing that information to them. Let me turn to customer reviews, consumer reviews. And this is where I think companies should keep in mind both truth in advertising standards and a statute called the Consumer Review Fairness Act that I'll get to in just a sec. Consumer reviews are all over the place. And as I said, I think they are one of the real benefits of online commerce, that I can go to a website and look at what consumers are saying. Think of how beneficial it's been to the Better Business Bureau. That, this opens up information to businesses and consumers, which I think is a great thing. If companies are acting, honestly and truthfully when it comes to those reviews, here are some pitfalls that obviously businesses want to avoid. I think there was a question about something like this earlier in the chat box. This was a weight loss product. We won't even get started with that. And here is the email that the company's owner sent an offshore business whose line of work was generating phony reviews. As I told you yesterday, I need 30 reviews, 3 per day. I'm sending you now another $200 and pay you total of $1,000 additional to the cost of the reviews if you stand on the product and make sure the next 12 days, if someone posts a negative review, you add real positive reviews from good accounts to make it 4.3 overall. That was the company president giving direction to the phony review company about how to post phony reviews. Small business owners that are on the call today, you very often are receiving invitations from companies that promise to be able to generate reviews for you, bump up your star rating. I would suggest, and I think the BBB would suggest, to look at those offers very skeptically, because a number of those companies are really asking you to engage with them in illegal conduct. And I don't think legitimate businesses want to be in the business of generating phony reviews. Just not something you want to do. So that's one example where the FTC took action. Here's another one, a really troubling one. This is a brand name cosmetic company that has a very big national reputation. And what the FTC's allegation in this case was that the company president directed her own employees to create false identities on a major national cosmetics website, create a new persona, set up a fake email, clear their cookies, connect with the VPN to kind of erase their steps to cover their tracks, and post, in effect, phony reviews. The FTC took legal action not only against the company, but settled the lawsuit against the company president too. She was named not just in her corporate capacity, but individually. So, I appreciate that there could be over-enthusiastic marketing managers out there, over-enthusiastic folks that want to generate buzz about their product. How to do it is not to post false reviews or to have employees or friends or family members sort of gin up this kind of falsity in the review process. So these are cases that resulted in settlements with the FTC. Here's another example that raises something similar. The FTC looked at this case initially. This was I guess you could call it either a fragrance that was also an insect repellent or an insect repellent that was also a fragrance. And that's kind of a clever idea because, isn't that the one complaint consumers often have with insect repellents is the smell. So this company made representations about its effectiveness at repelling mosquitoes that carry just deadly diseases. So yes, the FTC took legal action alleging that the company did not have sound science to back up their claims. But that's only one aspect of the case that the FTC challenged. The FTC also took a look at a number of the reviews posted about the product and realized, ultimately found out that a number of them had been posted by the company president's mother and aunts. Now, far be it from me to tell my aunt they can't post. Of course, that's not the issue. I wouldn't even try, but it's a question of disclosure. And again, not a fancy legalese, but think of the difference between, I love this product, it's the best around. That's one way to do it, but how that can be disclosed is to say, so proud of my child for starting this company with this great product that I love and often use. It's a matter of simple disclosure that not only I would suggest, I don't even think it causes a problem. It may well, that kind of honesty and clarity may well boost the impact of reviews. Because let's face it, who's going to be tougher on a product than their mothers and aunts, right? So this is an example where simple disclosure would have cured the problem, but not disclosing that information, we allege that the FTC violated the law. One other issue, and I absolutely understand the frustration that businesses feel when they see what they believe to be unfair or unwarranted negative reviews about them. When I talk to businesses about this, they say, you have no idea what it's like to get an unfair negative review. I have to respond by saying, hey, I work for the federal government. I've read a couple nasty reviews before. I get that. No problem. I understand. And it is not illegal for companies to respond. They do, however, need to be careful how it was done. This is an example where a mortgage company got a bad review on a very popular review site and clapped back at the reviewer, at the customer, in a way that revealed personal information about the customer's finances. Basically the company was attempting to defend itself by saying, oh, you're not telling the whole story. You were behind in your payments. You weren't paying your bills. The FTC's concern was that violates the Fair Credit Reporting Act and a number of other practices. So as I said, all I would suggest is for companies tempted to clap back to take a deep breath, to consider both the legal ramifications and this is just me talking, kind of the customer relations ramifications. I understand, the desire to get the true story out. I'm just suggesting care and caution if that's something that a company is thinking about doing. Also, the most recent FTC case, the Fashion Nova matter, I think has a lot to say of interest about endorsements, about consumer reviews. The allegation in this case, this was a popular fashion dress website, a very popular one, that offered star reviews. The company used a third-party interface that allowed them to screen out the 1, 2, and 3-star reviews and post the 4 and 5-star reviews. The FTC challenged that as a violation of the FTC Act, saying that it was leaving a misimpression by cutting out the bad reviews and only showing the good reviews. That's something that you're going to want to think about. The FTC has issued 2 new guidance brochures just within the past 2 weeks on this, a guide for marketers about soliciting or paying for online reviews, and a guide for platforms about featuring customer reviews. These two are available at business.ftc.gov. Let me finish my legal discussion with a statute that I think some companies may not be paying as close attention to as they should. This is called the Consumer Review Fairness Act. This is a statute that was passed unanimously in December of 2016. Congress passed this unanimously. That tells you something. And what the CRFA does is it prohibits companies from using contract terms that restrict consumers' ability to review their products, services, or conduct, or that imposes a penalty against consumers who give a review they don't like, or that requires consumers to give up their intellectual property in the content of their reviews. I think this may be the first case that the FTC brought under the Consumer Review Fairness Act. This was kind of interesting. This was an HVAC company. Agree that the terms and conditions of the contract shall remain private and confidential and shall not be made public or given to anyone to make public. How do you like the next clause? In all caps, including the Better Business Bureau. Consumer also agrees not to file any complaints with the BBB. You'll see it goes on and on. Other companies specifically said, not this company, but the FTC took action against other companies that specifically said, you have to give us the highest star rating if you post a review. Another company basically said, this was a trail riding company, in Las Vegas, said, you owe us thousands of dollars if you complain to animal welfare authorities that the animals are being mistreated. Wow. I think some of these clauses may be buried in contracts that folks haven't looked at a little while. Just a reminder to pay attention to the Consumer Review Fairness Act. So how can we work together? Certainly go to business.ftc.gov to learn more about the law. I would ask you to subscribe to the FTC's Business Center blog at ftc.gov/subscribe. You want to know how to make a full disclosure of a material connection? You're going to hear it right now. I'm the business blogger, the primary business blogger, at least. So I am asking you to subscribe to a blog that I am the curator of and the primary author, but it gives you once or twice a week a short recap of an important development in marketing law or policy going on at the FTC. One's about recent cases. You would have heard immediately about that Fashion Nova case had you been a subscriber to the Business Center blog. The other thing I want to remind you is that scammers have got small businesses in their sites. It was a problem before COVID. We think it's a problem now and will continue to be. We have a lot of resources for how you can train your staff to spot a scammer. And you know what these people are like. They will send you bogus invoices for products you didn't order. They will try to
That everyone has the full extent
employees into giving out private information or giving them access to their. So that's basically what makes an actor practice a brief training session at a staff meeting using FTC materials. Before I get to social media, I could substantially reduce the risk of a small business being hit on the minds by the devastating financial loss. What's the FTC been doing about deceptive consumers or some of the outrageous things we're seeing in the marketplace? Please report it to us at reportfraud.ftc.gov. This is a national database. A number of BBBs also submit their information in that. It is available only to law enforcement officers. Reportfraud.ftc.gov. Here's what the website looks like. And, fraud, we're also including deceptive practices. Just a reminder that this page, like almost all pages on ftc.gov, especially on the consumer and news side, is also in Spanish. And so we try to make it as easy as possible for people to let us know, to report. We are not able to negotiate individually between a business and a consumer. Rather, we use these reports to help set our national law enforcement priorities. And so consumers who file those reports are helping us immeasurably figure out where the tax dollars that you pay go best to fight deception in the marketplace. The final thing I want to mention is I don't forget who I work for. I work for the American taxpayer. That's why we have an open door, open phone, open email policy. If you have any questions, either about a business practice or something, you can go to email me at lfair@ftc.gov. I can't give you, I'll have an answer, just as I can't give you a guarantee that I'll have an answer to your questions coming up. But you definitely can know that I will do my best to get you closer to the answer that you need. We think important partners are BBB members and BBB staffers themselves. We think we share the goal of truth in advertising. So that's why I'm happy in the few minutes that remain. If there are, Brian or Victoria, if there are questions, I would be delighted to address what I can.
So I went ahead and I tried to pull them all from the chat into a list. So let's just get started. The first one I think you kind of talked about was and I think you might have addressed it. In the last 2 months, I've been receiving emails that offer to sell packages of 5, 10, or 25 5-star Google reviews. And there it guess that's just, how to address that. And I think you already mentioned that. So
it's really not much different to, would you like to buy some stolen cars? It's someone inviting you to do something illegal and they're doing something illegal too. So.
All right, great. So thank you for clarifying on that. So the next one, is it possible to check out the influencer first? I mean, it's hard to determine who's truthful and who's not. So is there any information on how to look up influencers?
Well, I think the FTC does not have a catalog of influencers or anything like that. But I think if a company is thinking about hiring an influencer, I think the important thing is to use the same kind of due diligence that you would use in any kind of business venture, where you investigate your vendors, you investigate who you're going to do business with. We all remember our grandmas telling us the old thing that if you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. So I think by asking around, by investigating, by doing just some internet research, if this is a person who's been involved in some questionable promotions in the past, do you want them representing your company? But educating what they do, monitoring what they do, and if you spot them doing something that is not in keeping with the law or your company's ethos, cut them loose.
All right. Thank you. So how can we report fake information? Facebook and Instagram won't take down the fake profiles. I'm
sorry, I didn't hear the first part of the question, Victoria.
How can we report fake influencers? Facebook and Instagram won't take down the fake profiles.
You can report it to reportfraud.ftc.gov.
All right. And then we did get another one. Just to be clear, does this information pertain to political advertisements or nonprofits?
Interesting question. It does not. We are talking about commercial transactions. And so the First Amendment protects political advertising in a different way. So these standards are not applicable to political ads. Now, the question about nonprofits is an interesting one because as a general rule, the operation of nonprofits is handled by state authorities that deal with nonprofits. However, telemarketers, the telemarketing efforts of nonprofits, a lot of that activity is covered by the telemarketing sales rule. And indeed, the FTC has gone after hundreds of bogus nonprofits. Most recently were nonprofits that claimed to be helping America's veterans, that claimed to be dealing with female veterans with breast cancer and helping to pay their medical bills, providing psychological services or respite services for military families. This one gets me because I'm an Army brat. I went to 12 schools in 12 years, and the idea of somebody ripping off America's veterans through a phony charity, it gets me in a way that it's hard for me to even describe. So we do go after bogus charities. My suggestion is what the FTC recommends with regard to scam prevention, what the FTC recommends with regard to data security. That's helpful information for nonprofits to take into account. I will warn nonprofits that they are very often the target of these small business scams, because scammers know that for the most part, most of your staffing is done by volunteers. And so we have gone after companies that did this phony invoice scams type thing, to churches, to schools, to charitable organizations. So my suggestion to nonprofits is just to be on guard, because they are in the sights of scammers too.
All right, well, thank you so much for clarifying. So kind of to switch gears, what about endorsements such as reviews, comments on work culture for recruitment purposes? Is there anything different with that since it's not a product? So the question is, would it be okay to ask employees to post feedback/reviews? Is that still considered fake if it's in their own words and they are willingly doing it?
I think that the fact that things are free does not enter into that's not the deciding factor. Companies, I do think, are wise to come up with in-house policies on things like that. The issue from the FTC standpoint is going to be disclosure. Truthful statements, where it is clear where the person works, it is clear in what capacity they are speaking. That's one thing. What you do have to worry about, aside from the FTC, is what the user agreement is with the company, with that platform. So yes, you want to make sure you're dealing with FTC issues. You also want to take a careful look to see what the platform requires for things like that. But if, for example, somebody is talking about, a work site or a new product, things like that, we want to make sure that the disclosure is clear of what their status is for why they're talking about it.
Great. So our next one was, I think you touched on it. It was about leaving feedback on Facebook ads from employees. So I think you answered that there. So another one was, if that mortgage company were to ever apply, okay, never mind. It was, I guess, kind of questionable, because I guess that mortgage company that you mentioned, that is a review that I guess people were wondering if it would be okay for us to publish on our platform, kind of thing. So we'll just move on, because I think that'll turn into more of an internal discussion.
Yeah.
So let's see. Okay, Google and Amazon have an outsized role in product and service purchases in the US. Reviews and not endorsements are the prominent means to promote these purchases. How can we protect ourselves and our businesses from fake reviews there? And is there anything that FTC can do in both of those cases?
Yes, I mean, this is dealing with a top priority that the FTC's new chair Khan, has made. Just looking at the role of those major platforms. Certainly, if companies spot fake reviews, you want to take every step that the platform gives you. I'm not speaking about one platform in particular, to contest those reviews. And so I think that's one important thing to do, to see if you can deal with anything like that. And then again, if you spot things, also letting us know at reportfraud.ftc.gov is helpful too.
Okay.
But I think what I can say is I absolutely, I talk to a lot of businesses who experience this, that have said, I'm getting, one of my competitors is posting phony negative information about me, about our restaurant, about our product. We certainly have brought a few cases. I remember one just because it was a trampoline case of all things, and a company that sold trampolines went on YouTube to a competitor's site where the competitor showed its product and wrote a comment, not disclosing that it was a competitor, that said, in effect, oh, that company's trampolines are lousy, you should use this company's trampolines instead. And that was an allegation that we charged as deceptive in an FTC lawsuit.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that one. And so we have I think our last one is, if I missed any, I do apologize. I tried to go through the chat box and put them into a note. So I've seen several businesses offer enter a giveaway for a free gift card in exchange for leaving us a Google review. Is this sort of thing against the law if it's negative
I think
or positive?
Those kinds of incentives companies should be very leery about engaging in. I think one of our new guidebooks on reviews talks about that pretty specifically, and the FTC has taken action against several companies that offered. I think one of them offered a raffle for an iPod. I'm sorry, a raffle for an iPad. For people who left reviews. Incentivizing reviews is very risky business. And I think the best thing to do is take a look at that new brochure available at business.ftc.gov, because it does offer some suggestions in that area.
All right. So does anyone have any other questions before we depart?
Hey, Leslie, good afternoon there. I just want to thank you so much. This is Brian. For this professional presentation and being the host. I know Victoria's been working on getting someone from the FTC for several months. As you can see of the audience, we had people from all over the BBB system and many of our accredited businesses. And BBBs are just so fortunate to have the professional relationship that we do with FTC, and just all the resources all of our shred days, all the material that you provide us to put in our goodie bags are just so appreciative. But this topic, it was spot on. And more importantly, I enjoyed your enthusiasm through your presentation that just kept my attention the whole time. Thank you so much, Leslie. And it stopped snowing here, so Victoria can
All right, so we do have one question, and it is from our very own Alicia Ferguson. Are businesses allowed to add contract text after the fact to restrict reviews like in a settlement agreement?
I think that involves a lot of very specific negotiations that I think are going to be a lot more fact specific. So this is the one question that, without kind of knowing a bigger picture, I would not want to hazard a guess. I know this issue comes up a lot. And if there is anything that I can find out for you to offer more information, I'll be happy to do that.
All right. Thank you so much. And I think that might be it. Or are there any FTC plans to deal with deceptive listings with fake reviews online, like Google and yes? Yes,
I mean, we will continue. We appreciate these reviews are highly material to consumers, highly material. And that's why we want to make sure that the stream of commerce flows freely and cleanly to do what we can to make sure that reviews represent the truthful view of people who have actually used the product.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. I will get with Leslie and get those first few slides recorded and then get this back out to everyone. Again, thank you so much for all of your questions. I'm sure if you have anything that you follow up, you can email and I'll be glad to pass them on to Leslie. All right. Or you guys have her email, lfair@ftc, right? So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.